Tutankhamun, also known as Tutankhamen and King Tut, 1336 to 1327 BC, is the most famous and instantly recognizable pharaoh in the modern world. His golden sarcophagus is now a symbol almost synonymous with Egypt. His name means living image of the god, Amun. He was born in the year 11 of the reign of Pharaoh Amenhotep IV, better known as Akhenaten, 1353 to 1336 BC, and died, some claim mysteriously, in 1327 BC at the age of 17 or 18. He became the celebrity pharaoh he is today in 1922 AD when the archaeologist Howard Carter discovered his almost intact tomb in the Valley of the Kings. While it was initially thought that Tutankhamun was a minor ruler, whose reign was of little consequence, opinion has changed as further evidence has come to light. Today Tutankhamun is recognized as an important pharaoh who returned order to a land left in chaos by his father's political-religious reforms and who would no doubt have made further impressive contributions to Egypt's history if not for his early death. Tutankhamun's youth and rise to power. Tutankhamun's father was Amenhotep IV of the 18th dynasty of Egypt, whose wife, Nefertiti, is as equally famous and recognizable as her stepson. Tutankhamun's mother is thought to have been the Lady Kia, one of Amenhotep's lesser wives, and was not Nefertiti, though this is a common misconception. It has also been suggested that Tutankhamun was the son of Amenhotep III, 1386 to 1353 BC, and his queen Tai, 1398 to 1338 BC, but most scholars reject this theory. His mother is not mentioned in any inscriptions and so her identity is unknown. Egyptologist ᴍᴜ has noted that most scholars believe Kia was Tutankhamun's mother, but the balance of opinion may yet change. Amenhotep III ruled over a land whose priesthood, centered on the god Amun, had been steadily growing in power for centuries. By the time Amenhotep IV came to power, the priests of Amun were on almost equal standing with the royal house in terms of wealth and influence. In either the 9th or the 5th year of his reign, Amenhotep IV outlawed the old religion, closed the temples, and proclaimed himself the living incarnation of a single, all-powerful, deity known as Aten. He moved his seat of power from the traditional palace at Thebes to one he built at the city he founded, Akhetaten, the horizon of Aten, later known as Amarna, and proceeded to concentrate on his new religion, often to the detriment of the people of Egypt. Akhenaten's religious reforms, and their impact during his reign, would also define the later rule of his son. Tutankhamun was named Tutankhaten, living image of Aten, when he was born and, while still a child, was engaged to the fourth daughter of Nefertiti and Akhenaten, his half-sister Ankhesenpeten. Her life is from Aten or her life is of Aten. Ankhesenpeten must have been older than Tutankhaten, however, as she was previously married to her father and may have had a daughter by him. Tutankhaten came to the throne upon the death of his father in 1336 BC at the age of 8 or 9. Miniature symbols of royalty, such as the crook and flail, royal staff, were found in his tomb and it seems likely he played with these as a young child as he was being groomed for future rule. ᴍᴜ writes, a number of these items were inscribed with his birth name, demonstrating that he was crowned as Tutankhaten. Between the death of Akhenaten and the ascent of Tutankhaten there was an interim pharaoh named Smenkhare about whom little is known. It has been suggested, however, since Smenkhare's throne name was identical to that of Akhenaten's corregent, that this pharaoh was Nefertiti who ruled while Akhenaten's health may have been in decline and Tutankhaten was still too young to assume the throne. Nefertiti seems to have assumed the male persona of Smenkhare as ruler in order to avoid the same kinds of problems which arose after the death of the female pharaoh Hatshepsut centuries earlier when, in an effort to restore harmony to the land, since females were not supposed to rule, her successor Thutmose III had her name and memory erased from all public monuments and stele. Smenkhare died 2 years into her reign and Tutankhaten was crowned king. Tutankhaten becomes Tutankhamun. Early in his reign, Tutankhaten either decided for himself, or, more probably was forced, to return Egypt to the old religious practices which his father had outlawed and suppressed. The ideal of Ma'at, universal harmony, was the most important spiritual concept in ancient Egypt. It was believed that the land of Egypt was a mirror image of the celestial land and individuals had a responsibility to behave in a certain way on earth to keep balance with the higher realm. By abandoning the old gods and the ancient practices, Akhenaten would have upset this balance and destroyed the harmony between the people and their gods. When the people were forced to abandon their gods, it was thought, the gods abandoned the people. Tutankhamun's reforms, then, would have had an immense impact on the people of Egypt with his restoration of universal harmony. The temples were rebuilt and the priests who had hidden the iconography and texts relating to the old religion brought them back to their rightful places. Even though balance had been restored and temples and palaces rebuilt, Egypt was still recovering from the disorder Akhenaten had plunged the country into. Hawass writes, by the reign of Tutankhamun the situation in the Near East had changed drastically since the golden days of the Egyptian Empire. The army, whose training and equipping had been neglected by Akhenaten, was no longer the effectual fighting force it had been under the reign of Tutankhamun's grandfather Amenhotep III. The commander of the army, Horemheb, 1320–1292 BC, who was held in high regard as one of Tutankhamun's chief advisors, was repeatedly unsuccessful in his campaigns against the Hittites. Egypt failed to regain Kadesh and also lost a number of other vassal states. The Hittites grew more powerful as Tutankhamun struggled to restore Egypt to its former glory and, no longer having to fear intervention from the Egyptian military, the Hittites destroyed the kingdom of the Mitanni, who had formerly been an ally of Egypt. It should be kept in mind that Tutankhamun, at this time, was around the age of 16 and was tasked with the enormous responsibility of revitalizing the country his father had single-handedly devastated. Even with the help of the elder counselors who surrounded him, the teenage king must have found his position daunting, but, still, he seems to have done his best to redeem the country's present from its recent past. What he might have accomplished in a longer reign will never be known as he died before reaching the age of 20. Tutankhamun's death and aftermath. The death of the young king has been called mysterious for centuries, but there really is no mystery involved. Many people died young in the ancient world just as many do in the present day. The damage to Tutankhamun's skull, which early historians cited as proof that he was murdered, has come to be understood as the work of the embalmers who removed the brain. The injuries to the body of the skeleton are the result of its removal from the sarcophagus during the 1922 AD excavation, when the head was removed from the body and the skeleton was violently pried loose because it was stuck to the bottom of the sarcophagus with resin. It has also been speculated that Tutankhamun died of an untreated abscess tooth or infection from a broken leg, but these theories have also been disproved. Another theory is that Tutankhamun was the product of an incestuous union and so was simply not genetically disposed to a long life. Historians who support this theory point to the two children of Tutankhamun and Ankhesenamun who were both stillborn. Their mummies were buried with their father and discovered in his tomb, as physical evidence of the incestuous practices of Egyptian royalty of the 18th dynasty. Whether Akhenaten and Ķīķ were related, however, is not known, and so this theory also cannot be confirmed. All that is clearly known is that Tutankhamun died in January of 1327 BC and that his death was unexpected, as evidenced by the hasty construction of his tomb.